Welcome everybody to this panel discussion on AI and human creativity. So this event is organized by the Digital Future Initiative. This is an initiative that Kostis Miklaros started last year to kind of bring together the thought leadership at CBS in both research but also in the classroom towards kind of what the digital future is really going to look like in business and in daily life. So I'm going to moderate this panel. I'm Stephan Meier. I'm the James P. Gorman Professor of Business Strategy, the chair of the Management Division, and also the faculty lead in one of those labs in the Digital Future Initiatives that is more focused on human and in the digital life. So the large interest in this panel, I think, shows both that the topic is relevant, but also that our panelists are really distinct experts on it. Unfortunately, Harry West had to cancel literally last second. He had a death in his immediate family overnight and couldn't make it here. So creativity is really at the core of what makes us human. You know, the history of mankind is all about creativity, innovation, how to create new things. Albert Einstein defined it as, you know, creativity is seeing what others see and thinking what nobody else ever thought. And we actually thought that's really human. That's like what humans are really good at. And machines in their AI were supposed to do the mindless, mundane jobs. And now suddenly machines are actually good in seeing what others see and are also pretty good in thinking what we haven't thought that much, or at least it seems like that those algorithms are able to create something new. They're even able to compose music, making art, something we definitely thought was like critical to human. They can for sure write a better abstract of a paper than I can going forward. So this panel is really about like what is left for humans to do. You know, what is the role of human creativity, if any? How can we augment human creativity? Is there more machine-augmented creativity going forward? And so we have those two amazing experts, panelists here that I wanted to introduce before I get into the discussion. So Golnar Khosrowshahi is the founder and CEO of Reservoir Media Management. She's an alum from Columbia. She's a board member of the Digital Future Initiatives as well. Reservoir is a NASDAQ-listed, very successful music label. They have thousands of recording copyrights and offices around the country. She is, I think, single-handedly responsible for De La Soul being on streaming, which is a great blessing for the world. Reservoir got a couple of awards as the best music publisher, but Golnar has a lot of personal awards. So she was on Billboard's Power List in many years, 2020 to now. She's on the most powerful female executives. She was Indie Power Player in a couple of years. She is the Billboard recipient of Executive of the Year and was in 23 added to the Women's Music Hall of Fame and on the New Power of New York list by Variety. She's also not just an amazing executive, she's an artist herself. So she is a classically trained pianist by training, and then, not sure whether she saw the light or then moved away to the dark side by getting into business. So that's Golnar. And then we have Olivier Toubia. He's the Glaubinger Professor of Business at CBS. His research is really focused on innovation and creativity and idea generation as well. He has our foundational course on Foundation of Innovation, and he just, I think now constantly has to update that syllabi to make sure that generative AI is included in it. Not only does he do that in the classroom, but also in his research, thinks about, you know, what can generative AI do for creativity. So let me ask the two panelists a couple of questions before I open it up for a long period of Q&A to the audience. So let me start with you first, Golnar. You know, after Gen AI created a song in the style of Drake and The Weeknd, and the Beatles released the last new song where John Lennon was featured on it. So AI augmented music. It became clear, that the music industry will be affected tremendously. Also because the music industry is so fast and innovative, maybe it's also a good forecast. What's going to happen with other industries that take a little longer? So how do you see the future of human creativity in the music industry in general, and maybe in your business in particular?
Well, first of all, Stephan, thank you so much for having me here today. Kostis, thank you for the opportunity for maybe imparting a little bit of what I'm experiencing in the real world on the committee. And it's a real pleasure to be involved at Columbia, having been at school here, and to meet people like Olivier. And it's great to be here, so thank you. You said that machines are good at making art and music. A couple days ago, I had Claude write me a song about country roads leading me home. And this is what Claude wrote for me. The chorus goes like this. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, mountain mama, country roads lead me home. So Claude is very good at making art, but Claude is also very good at making art learned from the craft and the skill and the expertise of people like John Denver and the Danoffs. And so I don't think our days are numbered. I think that we need to frame this narrative to be not AI or, because that's how we're speaking about all of this all the time, AI or the human. And we need to reframe it and thinking about it as AI and human plus that AI is a more powerful creative engine because of efficiencies that can be enabled, because of the knowledge that we can have around music, because how we can develop and understand sounds. I mean, this is all specific to music, how we can understand blending cultures and creating new sounds. That is, in effect, what happens in the music business day in and day out. And the dream of any songwriter, any producer, any creator is to actually embark on a new sound. So I think that AI can certainly help us there. Time will tell also what the market demand is. There are currently over 100,000 tracks a day that are added to the streaming platforms. I mean, you could tell me it's 100,000 or 200,000 or 50,000. It doesn't matter. We don't have the bandwidth to consume that. We don't have it's immaterial once it gets to a certain number. And you can create all of this music by a bot. My daughter, who is here, works for a company called Boomy. And this is what they do all the time. I'm not sure how many songs you create, but I know it's a lot. And you can continue to go and work there. But it's there's no market demand. So what does it matter? What is the implication of all of this being out there when a consumer doesn't want to actually consume it? This summer, more than ever before, have we seen that people's relationship with music is live. It is based on almost a perceived friendship that they have. These people are all friends with Taylor Swift. They're friends with Beyonce. They are spending this money and dressing like these people and going to these concerts. I don't see a world where you are doing that, where you are actually exhibiting that kind of idolatry with a virtual artist or a virtual songwriter. I think that, as I said, people love music because their relationship is personal. It evokes a moment in their life when they were in love, when they were friends, when they left school. It doesn't matter. It brings up a memory. It conjures up an experience. And so it's very, very difficult to propose that in a compelling way that humans will ultimately have a relationship with something that's artificial, that relates to their personal experience and their personal memory. We have a songwriter by the name, he's a dear friend, producer, client. His name is Oak Felder. Last week or 2 weeks ago, he participated in the AI TED Talk series, which was 2 days in San Francisco. He played an AI-generated version of a song, and people listened to that. Okay, they listened to it, they enjoyed it. He brought out Wayani, the artist, who was another client of ours and one of the American Idol finalists, and people were screaming. People were happy. They were happy to see her, to have that connectivity, to have that experience, but also shows it's AI and, not AI or, because what he played was an enhanced Wayani with technology that just made it sonically superior, but still maintaining that core creativity that she brought to the table. I think there's interesting academic work that's being done in this area. Most recently in Nature, which was an article looking at whether the human or the AI is better. Again, I have a fundamental problem with this binary view. But they did conclude that, at least for now, I'm sure the study is already obsolete, at least for now, that the human is producing unique creative content. And as we saw with my Claude example and Take Me Home, Country Roads, Claude has a long way to go to make some unique content. I think that there are a lot of applications in our business that people are not talking about, they're not thinking about, and these are all B2B applications and B2B opportunities. How we license music, how we do micro-licensing, how we assess the metadata around our creative product and understand why people love certain trends and why they're embracing that. How we do work in the studio and how we speed up engineering and mastering. That could lead actually in an acceleration of how fast we can get product to market. That'll be definitely a change in our business. And that's where we're really focused on, and I think that's where there's a lot of business opportunity. So for now, I think the humans are here to stay.
Okay. Well, Golnar, maybe a follow-up, because you wrote in a Variety article that you have no, I'm quoting, I do have little doubt that this technology will put an end to an entire subset of creators whose work fall in the category of commodity music and commodity products. So you do think that there is a lot of creators that are going to be replaced.
Yes.
Do you think that that will affect the music industry as well? Because there are going to be less people who might create.
So that is a particular tranche in our business, which is the drivers or the people who create production music. Commodity music that is licensed in a very specific price bracket, that has a very specific way that it is created, in that there's a brief, you need XYZ, that's developed, produced, and delivered. It's work for hire. Sometimes it could be royalty-free even. We're not in that business. We may be in that business tangentially in that we own a few catalogs that are theme songs for things like American Idol or America's Got Talent and things like that. But I don't really consider our catalog business and our frontline business to be in that business. Unfortunately, I'm not a fan of any creative class being, sort of having it contract, but that is a subset of our creative class that is not going to be around for much longer.
So let's maybe move, Olivier, let's move a little bit beyond the entertainment industry into product development. There was a recent study that showed that AI has better and more ideas for new products than Wharton MBAs. Now that might be the Wharton effect, but what is left for humans to do when it comes to product development, ideation, and consumer insight, which might be very different from that human aspect, because I'm not buying it because of Taylor Swift. I might not even care that much that a human or a machine created that product, that idea.
So yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you on the same panel. I agree with everything that you've said. It's great to hear your thoughts, so thank you very much for the comments. So I think in terms of the innovation space, I mean, creativity at the end of the day is still creativity, so there's some fundamental similarities. There's creativity that is meant to create experiences, and maybe that's more the entertainment industry. And then there's creativity that is more about maybe offering solutions to problems, or maybe like looking more at the value being out of the kind of the holistic products and the function of the product. And so it's still creativity, but it's slightly different values of creativity that people place. But I agree with everything that you say, which is that it's the human end, and kind of to your question about what's left in the innovation world. I think just like you mentioned, people connecting with Taylor Swift as a person. I think even in as humans, we tend to put a premium on human-crafted products. If something is handmade, we tend to put a premium on this. If a story is true, we tend to put a premium on this. So I think that just like people putting a premium on the human interaction in the music industry, I think that also in the innovation space, it will still be true that people will be willing to pay a premium for human-crafted, human-created products. Just knowing that this was made by a real person probably will have a premium on the market. Now, of course, from a business perspective, if as a firm I can use AI to create a product that will be maybe valued a little bit less, but that will cost me much less to produce, then the value stick, which you teach your students in the strategy core, suggests that actually there's a bigger gap, so there's more profit to be made if I can create something almost as good with a fraction of the cost. So definitely there is a threat to humans, but at the same time, I think that at the high end of the market, probably, I think we'll still see handcrafted, human-generated stuff. Now, in terms of specifically the types of activities that are being possibly done by AI, this really follows the entire innovation process. So what AI is already very good at doing is taking a transcript of observations, interviews, market research, and summarizing, giving you insights. It's really good at that. The ideation piece of the process, there was this one paper that shows that on average, the quality was higher from GPT versus Wharton undergrads. Actually, the undergrads had more novelty in their ideas, so it was not a clear win. But definitely, we're seeing Gen AI being used to generate ideas that are on average at least as good as humans. It's not clear whether the best ones are as good as the best human ones, but definitely that this is getting better and better. So that's definitely going to be one type of activities. And then if you move down the funnel, you have all these market research, demand forecasting, test marketing, and people are starting to use AI also there to forecast demand for new products. So just describe a product to GPT and ask how many people would buy this product. And so we're seeing some promise there with also some caveats and some limitations. But that's another element. And then moving all the way down to launching the product and promotional material. Again, GPT with Dolly and other Midjourney and Stable Diffusion already able to produce promotional content. So the entire innovation funnel has tasks that could be potentially done by AI. Now, there's also some caveats that need to be thought about. There's the social aspect, which is that AI was trained based on input from humans. And if this input has social biases, prejudice, associations, these tend to be captured also in Gen AI. So you might create products that would reflect the preferences of certain groups of people, but maybe ignore other groups. So that's kind of the social issues, social biases. There's also more cognitive issues. Actually, what we're seeing in our research is that just like humans, AI tends to fixate on ideas when it's ideating. So as we discussed, the ideas tend to be not as novel, not as diverse. So it tends to, if you ask 40 ideas from GPT, it's going to give you 40 ideas that tend to be all drilling down in one rabbit hole. So there's this issue of fixation that can be fixed, but it's something we need to be mindful of. And then also, I think there's a more experiential or emotional, aspect, which is that when we have entrepreneurs here in the room, I'm sure, who they've had experiences in their lives, and they create in response to this. They innovate to solve problems that they have or that other people have that they've observed. So the inspiration for creativity often comes from life, from things that happen to us. And we have that, but AI doesn't have a life. So it doesn't have these random things happening to it that are going to inspire creativity. So it's gonna, again, it's Gen AI is a model of the past, and so it's going to generate a future that reflects the past. But it's not going to necessarily respond to new things that are happening in real time, unless we train the model to do that. So I'm probably going to stop here for now. I can speak for the whole hour. So yeah, these are just some answers.
Interesting. So I think you both say the kind of this augmentation piece, so that we augment humans with machines. Now, in order to really get the benefit of that, what do we need to do? Both, what do the humans need to do? What do businesses potentially do? And what does the regulation need to do? And I think in the creative industry, how to think about copyrights and whatever might be one of them that can facilitate this augmentation and make sure that can really get the benefits of like this machine augmented human creativity going forward.
You're looking directly at me, so. I think that from a human perspective, we need to have a team of people, which we do, who are embracing technology, who have always embraced technology, and understand that these are tools that are not a threat to them, but are tools that can accelerate and make things more efficient. So I think that's really key from a management standpoint and from a team standpoint, that you don't have that kind of resistance it just within the company. From a business standpoint, we are often the best clients for innovation in our business. And so we're the best test drivers for innovation in our business. We don't claim to be software developers. We don't claim to be technology developers. We own and manage and value enhance music copyrights. That is our core competence. That is what we're focused on. So we are always sourcing and really investigating new technology, and we become the best customers and the best test drivers of that. And I think that's decisions that we make at a business level that's important for us to stay at the forefront there. From a legislative standpoint, there's a lot of interesting debate going on here. Anthropic, the company I mentioned earlier, and its engine called Claude is currently being sued by Universal Music, as well as Concord and APCO, because Anthropic claims that Claude is not taking any IP from anything that existed before. Case in point, I ran that, I think, 4 days ago. And I'm sure if I ran it again today, it would give me something similar. There is a bill that was presented 2 weeks ago by Chuck Schumer called No Fakes, which stands for Nurture Originals, Foster Art, Keep Entertainment Safe. No Fakes Act. The combination, now, nobody knows how long it's going to take. We're going into an election year, et cetera. Nobody knows how long something like this will take to put in effect. And it will pivot to have a different iteration than how it was authored. But the general idea is that we can thrive, we can live and thrive. We as a music company that owns IP can live and thrive in a world where our IP continues to be monetized as it informs artificial intelligence that derives new work based on the learning from that work. Now you can get into a discussion about the fact that all of this music is based on music from the past. Everything I generate is created from my experience, my listenership, from playing, from classical to pop, it doesn't matter of the genre. So there will be debate around when does it actually become copyright infringement? And so when is that inflection point where you actually have a right to that intellectual property? Was it enough just if the lyric was just Take Me Home Country Road, no Mountain Mama, no West Virginia? I don't know. Those are the debates that will continue, but in Europe as well as in the US, there is movement on legislation with hope for very small people like myself and very large people like Universal who will continue to advocate for creators' rights.
Yes, I think so entertainment is the business, but I think if we take a bigger picture, we're looking at culture. And I think because entertainment is how culture is transmitted and created. So I'm French, so I'm all for government, intervention.
You live here.
Yeah, but you can. So so I think that we create stories because that's how we make sense of the world. That's how we teach value. That's how we, come up with new values, and that's how that's how we create culture and transmit culture. So I think beyond the business of monetizing, I think we need to think about what it does to culture and to how culture is shaped. And I think we need the government, regulators need to think carefully about the impact of AI on that. Do you want to outsource the creation of culture to computers completely? And we're in the US, and these computers, these companies tend to be American companies, but if you're in France, do you want American companies to actually create culture and replace the local culture? We have a very diverse world with lots of different cultures. And then is that going to lead to maybe one dominant form of culture that is going to be diffused throughout the world? So I think we need to really think carefully beyond the business about really why we use creativity in the first place, and what it teaches us and how it shapes how we think and our values. I don't have the answer, but I think we need to keep an eye on this bigger picture beyond just the business.
But if the human, if the machine augmented creativity is better, why does the government need to intervene to protect the humans? If it's this emotion, the whole history and everything, why do we need?
Donuts taste better than healthy food. Doesn't mean that people should eat donuts all the time, right? Depends what you mean by better, right?
Do you eat donuts all the time?
Yeah.
You want to, sorry, you want to answer?
I mean, Columbia provides education. The education that you're getting here should be protected. You are spending a lot of money to get this education, and it is giving you credentials that are not commodity credentials. Why is a songwriter any different? The songwriter is creating something, that's their product. Columbia is creating this program, all of these things that it's giving you that you are getting. Songwriter is the same. It's a business, it's creating a product, it's entitled to be compensated, it's entitled to be compensated fairly, and it's entitled to be compensated long-term. So the machine can come along, but the machine was informed by that creative product.
So before I open it up to question, you don't think that a machine-generated song will ever win an award?
The machine-generated song, as an artist or a writer or a producer, I don't think the I think that it will in a faddish moment, sure. It will in a moment of fad, and maybe you'll see a time where the Recording Academy will have a category for the best virtual artist, best virtual songwriter, I don't know. Claude could contend in that category.
So let's just have there are microphones on both sides, so let's get into Q&A. So just let me know if you have questions, maybe down here.
Thank you. An amazing discussion, an incredibly important topic. Just to be clear, I teach with Stephan, so I'm sort of a half inside, half outside. Just one or two very quick observations and a question. There are some property rights, intellectual property right issues here, and we have to get those right. Let's assume that we figure out and get that right. That's a big assumption. What I hear you talking about is, and I've been writing in my notebook, on the one hand, we're talking about creating, and the other hand, we're talking about creativity. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between humans and technology creating together and humans and technology being creative together? Because one observation is a relatively small part of the workforce, including musicians and scientists, are actually doing something that could be called uniquely creative. Please argue with that. A lot of what we're doing is creating stuff, right? And one of the things that's so disruptive about Gen AI versus earlier AI is it actually is creating stuff, right? And what I think part of what we're all trying to figure out is, I was interested in your last comment, will we have the best song written by AI? But what does the category look like when we're asking what's the best song written by AI and a musician working together? Because it's that last category that's very interesting. I've asked 3 questions. I apologize for that.
If I miss answering part of your question, please tell me. AI is part of a technological evolution. So the music industry has always seen that kind of technological evolution. It just so happens that today's enhancement is taking this form. But throughout history, we have seen the process of the creation of music be improved and impacted by technology. So that's sort of where I stand there. In the context of creating versus creativity, you're going to have a class of creators that create, and they do a very, very good job, and that is their line of work. Then every so often, you have a class of creators that change sound, that create something new, that captivate hearts and minds and audiences everywhere with something that you haven't heard before. That will be a product that is informed by the human's creativity, coupled with the tools that the technology, in this case being the artificial intelligence, will give it. And I think that that's when you have creating and creativity happening simultaneously. But just like there's a niche artist that does that, there will be the niche artist that does that with the tech on that side. Think of it as the 0.00 top, 0.01%. So those are my thoughts, but Olivier may think differently.
So, I mean, I'm not sure I see the difference between creating and creativity. And so I think maybe, so you talk about Albert Einstein at the beginning. So I think, I'll get back to, so I think we have a tendency to confuse human creativity with divine creativity. We tend to think of creativity as kind of this divine intervention of creating something out of nothing, like, out of vacuum, like something just comes out. And we think that's human creativity, and we think that maybe machines won't be able to do that. But actually, human creativity is not that. Actually, Albert Einstein said that creativity is about combining things. It's about finding new combinations and then finding the useful ones. So it's more like chemistry. It's more about finding some ingredients and finding ways to combine the ingredients to create something new that looks like it's completely different, but actually it still came from something. It's still the product of some reaction between some ingredients. And that is really what we do as humans when we create, even though we feel like we are divine creature, that actually what we do is we do chemistry, we do combinatorials. And machines can do the same as well. So I think we've seen now that AI is able to combine and create just like we humans are able to do it. So in that sense, maybe that blurs the line between creating and creativity. I think all of this is just combining stuff in an experiment and finding some useful combinations out of the useless ones.
Hi. So I've seen a lot of research about the view that AI can't really compete with the more lyrical genres like folk or pop or rap. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are in the context of your point about AI and what about genres that are more simplistic in terms of lyrics or have more of an atmosphere, like electronic or trance or Eurodance, where the lyrics don't matter as much? Are we closer to seeing AI take over there?
Again, it could take over. I wouldn't say take over because it still needs some human to facilitate it. I don't think anyone in this room is logging into their DSP or into their music provider and looking for AI-generated music. So at some point in that equation, there's going to be an artist and a songwriter or multiple songwriters who are human, or a producer in the kind of genres that you bring up. A lot of times there are no songwriters. But what then happens when you go to Coachella and that favorite DJ is playing? Who is it? It's nobody? Like, we're just going to watch, I don't know. Yes, please.
We've seen that already with like the Gorillaz.
Yes.
Can you use the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. We've seen that with the Gorillaz and other virtual artists. So I think the precedent is there.
They're
So
selling out arenas. I mean, is it sustainable? Is it going to be Country Roads Take Me Home and get licensed to Google to launch Google Home, as well as, be the theme song for the Kingsmen? That longevity is important when you're in an IP business that has a shelf life of about 100 years. And that's the business we're in. We're in the business of building long-term value and creating shareholder value on that long-term basis. So we need IP that's going to have that runway. I fully agree with you. There's a market, there are music festivals, there are people who will go and consume this, and they will forget about it tomorrow morning.
thank you.
That's great. That's also an experience.
Hi. I was wondering if you could try to unpack a little bit the idea of what fair compensation to IP holders might look like, because there is a whole level here of deep complexity that wasn't there in the last round of digital rights negotiations. It's pretty easy to say to Spotify, based on what people listened to, we'll divvy up a certain amount of money fairly based on that. But in the world of large language models and neural networks, when you ingest everybody's stuff and something comes out and you ask the question, well, what percentage is from who? The answer is, we don't know. And it's in fact unknowable. So in a world like that, what could fair compensation be?
I think this one's for you.
No, it's for you.
So two things on that. First of all, music, just so everybody knows, streamed music in the United States and a lot of places around the world, the royalty rates are actually governed by the Department of Justice. So there's no question as to whether my company versus Universal versus Warner can get a better mechanical royalty rate. Everybody's getting the same royalty rates. These are rates that are reviewed every 5 years. It goes through what's called the Copyright Royalty Board, and new rates are set. And there's a lot of fighting that goes on and suing that goes on, et cetera. The DSPs don't want to pay out anymore. People like us who are rights holders are advocating for greater compensation. So that part of it doesn't have any uncertainty around it. What happens a lot in our business today is sampling. And this happens day in and day out. We've spent 18 months clearing the samples across all of De La Soul's 6 albums, and we had to go and actually find rights holders of music and audio that they sampled and say, okay, this is worth 5%, this is worth 10%. I mean, it is a bit arbitrary, you're right. How are we going to decide who owns what when the bot is generating a new product? As is the case with everything in the music business, people are sitting around a studio and they sort of decide, okay, Stephan, this is 10% for you, and Olivier, this much for you. So I imagine that there will continue to be a little bit of that going on. But there's varying degrees of importance on these samples. Ariana Grande sampled a My Fair Lady song. The My Fair Lady copyright holder, I believe, has somewhere between 70 and 90% of that song. So if you have a copyright that's like that, that is sampled, that is generating the new product, and it's a little bit like what I just read, then there's got to be some negotiability around that. If you're talking about just commodity sampling, then I think that it would be regulated and standardized.
Olivier?
I don't have much to say, but I think it's also a technical challenge, as you said, of how to attribute the input to the outputs. And so there might be some ways to actually algorithmically try to get some, at least objective, measure of which songs might have had more weight in creating this new song and come up with some score. But so it may not be completely impossible to attribute. Again, not perfectly, but at least some fair, transparent, maybe system could be developed. I think there was a question in the back there. I think. Yeah, over there.
Okay, I have a microphone now. Hi, thank you for being here. You mentioned earlier that the regulatory environment for licensing and copyright and just IP in general as it relates to AI engines is pretty unclear at the moment, and a lot of that will be defined by the outcomes of lawsuits that are happening. But in the meantime, a lot of these companies, a lot of IP companies are structuring partnerships with AI companies as their models and their engines are developed. So what is your advice or what is your perspective on how these organizations can structure those partnerships in a way that is mutually beneficial, where you're protecting your IP and your artists, but also giving something valuable to the engines as they improve by using your data?
Well, I think it's, regardless of where the legislation lands, you could be in the business of generative AI music and actually out of the gate set up a compensation model that recognizes the music that informed the technology. And there may be legislation that passes that is more in favor, or that, that's a different model, but that's the way to successfully get out of the gates and collaborate with rights holders. When the Drake Weekend song was taken down, which I believe was less than 24 hours after it went up, part of the reason that it was taken down was that it was actually a breach of contract. It was a breach of the DSP contract between Universal and Spotify. So even though the legislation isn't there to protect the creator, today the DSP agreements that we have in place make that a breach of contract. But if I were to be getting into the Gen AI music business today, I would walk forward collaborating with the companies that represent the creators versus the opposite. Because as I said before, this is not binary, it is not or. It will end up in an and.
Thank you, and thanks for the super interesting talk. So we all know that content popularity exhibits a power law, right? And a lot of knowledge industry, knowledge economy output follows this power law. And it seems that over the last decades, tech makes that power law steeper and steeper and steeper. And I'm curious if you have any reasons to think that AI would be following the same trend and making that power law more steep, or potentially will we see some more uniformity and less winner take most outcomes in either music, entertainment overall, or even some of the kind of knowledge, big tech knowledge providers around us?
Hear you.
Maybe one way in which the opposite could happen is through customization. I think GenAI makes it possible to create customized content for each individual, in which actually it wouldn't be like, just mass market products that, winner takes all. It might actually be, I get my own song, I get my own show that is made for me based on my own interest. So that may be one other force. Otherwise, I'm not sure, in terms of the kind of mass market products, I'm not sure why it would follow a different path.
I think that winner takes most will continue as a principle in music. But there's a lot of work now being done on the DSP side, and Spotify actually just announced some initiatives on this front last week where a lot of music is actually being taken off the platform. And there's all this fakes on there, and there's just a lot of, the category of music that shouldn't be there is being removed. So that will change the compensation pool. Just so everybody understands, there is a whole pool, and then market share and listenership determines how all that money gets divvied up. So that will have an impact, but I really do think winner takes most is going to continue. And that's just a function of how people listen and how music is marketed and the benefits of touring and engaging with your listener base, et cetera. So I think that'll be around for a while.
And do you think it becomes more extreme with AI, so that
No.
fewer and fewer of those
No,
human?
I don't think it becomes more extreme. The thing about streaming, really about a lot of technology, is that it democratizes the industry. So, what Uber does for getting something, whatever, a car or food, it's democratized. Everybody has access to the same thing. Whether you execute or not is your choice. What streaming services do is it just democratizes your access, but also the creators are able to put whatever content they want up there. So I don't think that we are looking to a future where it becomes narrower and narrower. I think the opposite.
Hi, thanks. So you mentioned that in the very beginning that it's not about AI taking over, it's kind of about humans working with AI, and that's kind of been the theme. And I think that we've heard in our classes a lot in business school that it's all about like asking AI the right prompts and like learning how to interact with AI so that you get, the best output, which is also kind of what Professor Toubia was saying. So how do we sort of like educate ourselves and learn like what are the right prompts to ask, and how do we actually go about getting to that, ultimate or like the most ideal output?
I'm not sure that if the onus is on us to do that, or is the onus on the technology to get better and not make so many mistakes, because I don't know if you guys have used a lot of these platforms, but they make a lot of mistakes, factual mistakes, et cetera. I think actually ChatGPT is not connected to Wiki, so it makes a lot of those kinds of mistakes too. I think first of all, part of that burden is on the technology, and then the other part of it is for us to actually learn through trial and error, which is what I've been doing, and maybe at some point that becomes a more streamlined process, but this is just going to evolve and get better, and we need to get better at using it.
The simple answer is, in the spring, you should take the course GenAI for Business, which I studied in the fall, and someone else will teach in the spring. So this course will teach you all you need to know. But seriously, I think it's about experimenting, I think. One of the things we found is that it's maybe better to ask 1,000 different prompts and look at the aggregation of the result and try to find the best single prompt, because every prompt is going to have some architecture that's going to bias the results. So there's no such thing as one single perfect prompt, which is why we think that prompt engineering is maybe not going to be very sustainable, because this idea of finding the best prompt and getting a perfect answer from that, I think it may not be reasonable. So it's more about finding all possible combinations and aggregating the outputs. But I think also what's important is it's very hard to keep up with all the knowledge that's coming out of Gen AI. You talked about a paper published 2 weeks ago. Every week, every day, there's new studies published, and I think it's, to the extent you can take a bit of time to go beyond the headlines and see exactly what the research is showing, and try to keep up a little bit, that's very helpful, but it's very hard because there's so much going on. And you hear like the headlines, but actually sometimes if you dig a bit deeper, you can really see exactly what happened and what we learned from this new study. Yeah.
I mean, it's also crazy how much better it gets. And we're talking now a couple of months that I know about ChatGPT, and it got better in like a couple of months, tremendously better. So it will be able to maybe have emotions more, be creative in a year.
So thank you for being here. So you guys mentioned that AI and humans should be in the future. So I wonder how we should leverage in the AI so that we are get inspired from the past experiences, but creating something really unique and original.
Are you asking how do we use the technology to create something unique and original?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you guys mentioned that from the model, we are learning from the past. So I wonder what's the boundary between plagiarism and creativity?
I can tell you if you want.
Okay, sure. No, go ahead.
So I think as we discussed, creativity is always about combining existing stuff. So there's always a sense of taking existing elements but finding new ways to combine them. So in that sense, it's not fundamentally different. So it's not plagiarism, it's just inspiration. And I think AI is getting better and better at doing this. There's still, I think, fundamental limitations that we need to be mindful of based on the data on which it was trained. But as Stephan said, the models are just getting better and better. And if we understand the limitations, we're able to create the best system for interacting with these tools to get the best output. There's not one single solution. It's really you have to, based on the context, learn what type of pitfalls might exist, and then what is the best way to structure the exercise that to get the best output. It's kind of vague, but I don't think there's a unique answer to this question.
Okay, so we're at 1:30 anyway, so thank you so much, Golnar and Olivier. My takeaway from, I was a little bit more skeptical that there is something left for humans to be creative. It seems much more this augmentation piece might create, something beautiful that is really machines help humans to be more creative. But I also feel that there is a difference between music industry and maybe other product development or innovation in health and ideation in other aspects to it, where there might be less of a premium for human created. So that's going to be interesting to follow, and I'm sure we could come back in 2 weeks and everything is going to change. So it's moving very fast. So thank you so much for spending lunch with us here. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And to be continued.